What's going on, everyone? I'm ThatGuyMatt, and welcome back to my channel. In anticipation for 28 years later, I decided to actually go ahead and review 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later, so let's go ahead and get this out of the way, shall we? I'm just gonna go ahead and say that this is like one of my favorite zombie films of all time. I know that some people have a debate about whether or not these actually are zombies or not, but they're infected people, but yeah, I love 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, and I'm very anticipated for the new film. It's one of my most hyped movies of the past couple of years. That's how excited I am for this. So the basic premise of 28 Days Later is that you have this laboratory that is doing experiments on these monkeys. It's not quite obvious what they're doing until a PETA group, or animal rights activist group, they break into this laboratory very easily somehow. I'm not exactly sure how they do this, but they break into this laboratory and they're trying to let loose these chimpanzees or these monkeys, right? But what they don't realize is that these chimps actually have a virus inside them called rage. A virus that turns them into a bunch of rage-fueled, rabies-ridden monsters, essentially. They're zombies, but they're not exactly zombies. I know that there's like a debate about that, but well, for the sake of argument, we'll just say that they're zombies. They're infected people.
They're highly contagious. They've been given an inhibitor.
It takes place 28 days after the initial outbreak, and so the entirety of the UK is basically overrun by these zombies or whatever. And so you have a small group of survivors, you know, the main star being Jim, who's played by Cillian Murphy, and they're just trying to take refuge and trying to basically build a future for themselves because of this virus. So it should be stated off the bat that I think that 28 Days Later is a phenomenal zombie film. It's well crafted and it's well made considering the budget and how grainy and like low quality the film first may appear, but it's actually very competently made. And we'll get into some of the issues later on, but for all intents and purposes, I love 28 Days Later. It is one of the most intense, again, quote-unquote zombie films of all time, but I love this movie for what it is. Of course, you have the big star of the show, Cillian Murphy, and he plays the character of Jim, and it turns out that he actually got into a bike incident before the outbreak. So he actually, in a way, kind of got off scot-free, especially considering that the door was locked in his hospital room. Yeah, he goes downstairs and he takes some soda from a vending machine. At one point, he actually even uses the soda cans as a weapon, which is kind of cool. Of course, you know, he also goes outside and we get to see the streets of London just in absolute disarray. There are cars flipped over, there's papers and newspaper everywhere, and it just looks impressive. For something that came out in the early 2000s, it's impressive what they were able to accomplish with how this looks. And the basic way that they got this done was that they had to film it really early on in the morning, and they had to basically make it so that there was no traffic for very short amounts of time. And it really sells the idea of how the infected took over so easily. And the fact that all of this was done with like no CGI whatsoever, at least I don't think it did, is absolutely incredible. It was amazing how they were able to pull this off. You know, Jim is a very likable character. He's kind of the underdog, a guy that kind of has like no direction. He kind of starts off timid and almost unsure of himself in the beginning of the movie, and then in the end of the film, when he has to save everyone, he kind of like rises to the occasion to save his friends and the people that are close to him. Very likable character. Of course, this has a lot to do with the fact that Cillian Murphy just, you know, oozes charisma, and I've always liked the guy. So you have a character named Selena who is kind of the rugged badass of the group. She is the person who takes no shits from anyone, and considering how she turns on her friend Mark as quickly because he was simply scratched by the infected, shows that she has no mercy. She will do what she has to do to survive. And of course, we also have to talk about the infected in this movie and how the virus spreads. Like I said, the rage virus is one of, if not the scariest infections in any zombie film of all time. The simple idea that all it takes is one drop of blood to get into your system, whether it's in your eye, whether it's in your nose or your mouth, or if you get like a cut and it just gets into your bloodstream, very effective. And the fact that it only takes about maybe 10 to 15 seconds for you to turn into an infected. The transformation just looks so uncomfortable, how people are like twitching and they're like convulsing from pain. And like there's plenty of horrifying sequences in both 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later that I want to get into, but for all intents and purposes, I think the rage virus is a very interesting infection, and I can't wait to see how it's utilized in 28 Years Later. Another great aspect of 28 Days Later is that despite being a post-apocalyptic film, it manages to find a balance of horror, comedy, and also downtime for the characters where they actually get to experience the fun aspects of a apocalypse. And I think that's kind of like an underrated thing about a lot of zombie films, is that what do the characters actually do for fun? What do they do to actually kind of de-stress and detox? Because sure, it's important that they survive, but like, how do they actually maintain their sanity and have fun? In this movie, and also in a movie like Zombieland, for instance, we see the characters just simply raiding the shopping mall, and they're going inside and they're just having a great time picking out their favorite things, and they don't have to worry about, you know, paying for anything. In fact, I think Frank, you know, the dad in the movie, he actually leaves behind his credit card at the counter, which I thought was a nice little funny gag. Just like in Zombieland, it's good to enjoy the little things. Now, of course, we also have to mention the theme of this movie, In a House, in a Heartbeat, which is one of the most effective scores in any horror film ever. I think it's better utilized in 28 Years Later, but it was actually utilized very well in this movie, and it's so well done. It's intense, and it starts off with like a small tempo that just continues to rise and get even more chaotic, and it perfectly matches the theme and the idea of this world just going to shit. And not to mention, I love using it when I actually go outside and run. It's a great motivator, and it actually makes me feel like I'm part of like an apocalypse. So yeah, I just love the score for 28 Days Later. Very, very solid. This is definitely more of a mix than it is a negative, at least for me, but I can definitely see why watching the movie nowadays would be a bit of a chore for some people. And it's the fact that this movie has a very grimy and grainy and even low quality look to it. I do like it because it actually kind of adds to the atmosphere, and it is almost like an unintentional like positive for the movie. I don't know, like I said, this is maybe just me, but I think it's both a good and bad thing. I think that it adds to the environment and the atmosphere of the movie, but I could definitely see why for modern audiences they would prefer watching 28 Weeks Later, which is arguably a more polished film. Another big aspect is the ending. Now, of course, spoilers for the ending, but if you know anything about this movie, once the characters find refuge at this military camp, you know, they basically explain how the military think the whole world has basically gone to shit, and they're going to use the women to basically repopulate the earth. This is supposed to tie in with George Romero's, like, themes of how, like, the humans are just as nasty and evil as the zombies. And I think this is an aspect that still does work, although I think the subject matter is a bit uncomfortable, especially nowadays. Yeah, this is kind of a mixed aspect. I definitely see what they were trying to do. I do think that the ending is one of the weaker parts of the movie for me. It's not terrible, it's just that I do think that everything leading up to the military camp is probably the best part of the movie for me. But overall, still very good. So yeah, that was my review of 28 Days Later. A very solid film, and if for some reason you're watching this and you haven't seen the movie, then do yourself a favor, go out and watch it right now, especially in anticipation for 28 Years Later. I'm so fucking excited for that movie. But yeah, what do you guys think about 28 Days Later? Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you prefer the sequel? Let me know your thoughts down below. With all that said, guys, this has been That Guy Matt, and until next time, I will see you guys all in my next video. I hope you all take care.